April 13th, 1955. An agonizing internal terror changes history forever. Welcome to Final Agenda. Hit subscribe right now. Let's count down the 12 final moments of Albert Einstein before he refused his last surgery. Moment 1. The sudden collapse. Albert Einstein was working at his desk in his modest Princeton home, scribbling equations in a frantic race against time. Suddenly, a sharp, blinding pain ripped through his abdomen. He collapsed into his chair, gasping for air as severe nausea took hold. The structural weakness in his main artery, which had been surgically wrapped in protective cellophane 7 years prior, was finally giving way. The old scar tissue was tearing apart, and blood began to seep directly into his abdominal cavity. He knew his body was failing, but his mind remained sharply focused on his final cosmic equations. He desperately gripped the edge of his table, trying to stabilize his vision as a profound weakness spread through his entire body, stubbornly refusing to let his physical deterioration dictate his remaining minutes. Moment 2. The assistant's panic. His brilliant secretary, Helen Dukas, found him slumped over in unbearable agony. She had spent decades protecting the professor from the chaotic outside world, but she could not protect him from his own failing biology. She immediately knew that the medical crisis they had dreaded for years had finally arrived. Frantic and overwhelmed, her hands shook violently as she reached for the telephone to summon emergency medical help. Despite the intense pain radiating through his core, Einstein weakly raised a hand, trying to downplay the severity of the attack to comfort her. He deeply hated causing a fuss, even as his face grew completely pale from the massive internal strain, showing more concern for her emotional distress than his own condition. Moment 3. The grim diagnosis. Einstein's personal physician, Dr. Guy Ehrman, arrived quickly and rushed up the stairs to the bedroom. His examination was quick, tense, and deeply alarming. Taking Einstein's rapid, thready pulse and gently pressing on his swollen abdomen, the doctor confirmed that the abdominal aortic aneurysm had ruptured. It was a slow, agonizing leak. Knowing that every ticking second brought Einstein closer to total internal collapse and shock, the doctor ordered an immediate transfer to the hospital. He knew that survival at home was a mathematical impossibility, forcing Einstein to confront the clinical reality he had always despised. Dr. Ehrman quietly pulled Helen aside, explaining that they were racing against a ticking biological clock that could run out at any moment. Moment 4. The reluctant departure. Einstein did not want to leave his beloved home on Mercer Street. To him, this house was his ultimate sanctuary, a quiet place of equations, classical music, and deep thought. He thoroughly despised the cold, sterile nature of hospitals and insisted to the medical team that he just needed to rest in his own bed until the pain passed. He truly believed his long life's journey was reaching its natural conclusion. However, the sheer intensity of the physical pain eventually overwhelmed his stubborn resistance. Paramedics carefully lifted the fragile genius onto a stretcher and moved him to the waiting ambulance. As the vehicle pulled away, Einstein looked out at his quiet neighborhood, knowing he would likely never see it again. Silently saying goodbye to his world. Moment 5. Hospital arrival. The ambulance arrived at Princeton Hospital under a heavy shroud of secrecy to avoid a massive media circus. Reporters were already beginning to catch wind that something was terribly wrong with the world's most famous scientist. Einstein was admitted under an assumed name to buy the medical team precious, uninterrupted time. As he was wheeled through the quiet corridors, gripped by intense abdominal pressure, the staff looked on with deep reverence and profound anxiety. They knew the immense historical weight of the life that was resting in their hands. The hospital shifted into high gear for an emergency that would shock the world, implementing strict security barriers around his private wing to block reporters out. Moment 6. Gathering of medical minds. Inside the hospital room, a tense medical summit formed around Einstein's bed. Dr. Frank Glenn, a highly celebrated and prestigious surgeon from New York, was urgently called for a consultation alongside local experts. It was 1955, and medical science had evolved significantly since Einstein's first procedure. True arteriographs were now a reality in modern medicine. They had the advanced tools, the modern knowledge, and the technical capability to open him up, repair the leaking artery, and potentially grant him several more years of active, productive life if he would only allow them to operate. The doctors reviewed his scans with intense focus, mapping out a precise surgical strategy that they hoped would save him. Moment 7, the high-stakes proposal. The doctors approached Einstein's bedside to present their surgical plan. Dr. Glenn explained with absolute clarity and gravity that while the procedure was incredibly risky given his age, it represented his only definitive chance at survival. They painted a picture of hope, explaining that modern surgical techniques could patch the rupture and stop the internal bleeding completely. They stood by, pens ready, waiting for the historic patient to sign the consent form. The atmosphere in the room was thick with immense pressure. The doctors were practically begging him to let them fight for his life, confident they could rewrite his medical destiny and preserve the world's most brilliant mind for future discoveries. Moment 8, the iconic refusal. In this precise, historic moment, Albert Einstein delivered words that would echo through history. He looked directly at the anxious doctors, his mind completely lucid despite the agonizing pain, and calmly refused to sign the paperwork. He shook his head and said, "I want to go when I want. It is tasteless to prolong life artificially. I have done my share, it is time to go. I will do it elegantly." The rejection was absolute and unwavering. Einstein viewed life as a beautifully structured equation that had a natural beginning and a definitive, necessary end. To bypass that natural conclusion with invasive machinery and painful surgery felt entirely unscientific to his profound worldview. Moment 9, the final scientific request. Even as his physical body was steadily fading from the internal bleeding, Einstein's unmatched intellect remained fiercely active. His thoughts were not on fear or regret, but on the grand mystery he had left unsolved. He looked over at Helen Dukas and made a final, urgent request. He asked for his glasses, his pen, and his latest notebook containing his handwritten drafts of the unified field theory. This was his grand, unfinished masterpiece, an attempt to unite all the forces of nature into one single, beautiful equation. Even on the brink of death, the pursuit of cosmic truth was his ultimate comfort, proving that his mind transcended his failing physical vessel entirely. Moment 10, writing until the end. With his glasses on, and the notebook propped against his chest, Einstein began to write. The room was completely silent, save for the rhythmic scratching of his pen against the paper and his labored breathing. Line after line, he wrote down complex mathematical symbols, desperately trying to solve the universe before his own time ran out. He managed to complete several pages of intricate equations while in a state of active internal hemorrhaging. This image remains one of the most powerful testaments to human curiosity in history. He spent his final hours doing exactly what he was born to do, pouring his last remaining ounces of physical energy into the laws of nature. Moment 11, the midnight words. As the clock ticked past midnight on April 18, 1955, Einstein's breathing grew incredibly shallow. The internal bleeding had progressed to a critical point. The night nurse, Alberta Lois, stood by his bedside, monitoring his rapidly dropping vitals. Suddenly, Einstein began to mutter something in a low, urgent whisper. He was speaking passionately, but there was a tragic obstacle. He had reverted to his native German, a language he always used when deep in thought or emotion. The nurse did not speak a word of German, leaving his final thoughts completely untranslatable. She could only hold his hand in profound heartbreak as those final mysterious concepts slipped away into history forever. Moment 12. The last breath. At precisely 1:15 a.m., Albert Einstein took his final gentle breath. He passed away with absolute peace and dignity, exactly the way he had planned. On his nightstand lay the unfinished notebook of equations, a final testament to an endless journey of discovery. He had successfully refused the intrusive hands of surgery, choosing instead to exit the world with the same quiet elegance that he found in the laws of physics. His choice to face death on his own terms solidified his status as a profound philosopher of human existence, proving that true genius lies in knowing when the equation is complete and refusing to drag it out. Einstein chose his own elegant ending. Thank you for joining us today. Watch the next video on your screen right now.